Hello everyone and welcome to our presentation. Today we will talk about household survey. Household survey actually are an important tool used to collect data on many aspects of research by researchers, social scientists and the students such as household income, household consumption, size of household and many other aspects. But actually conducting a household survey is a big challenge because several aspects have to be considered while using these methods. Therefore, today Lawrence, Saifu and Ahmed, that is me, has developed this guide as a reference guide for the students. We hope you will enjoy our learning resource and will be helpful for your future research. We will in this presentation you will be able to see what could you learn from this presentation, what is actually the survey research is, what is effective questionnaire and how could you design it, what key issues you have to consider in household survey, such as the most important ones are the sampling, who should you sample, how should you do it and how many respondents you should select, the main challenges in the field, and what are the main ethical concerns you should consider while doing household survey. At the end, we will present our finding as a summary and you will test your knowledge of this presentation by doing an exercise or quiz. After this presentation, you may be able to learn to distinguish between different types of survey, be able to design an effective questionnaire, be able to identify a variety of challenges while planning and executing household survey, be able to determine representative sample size, and understand ethical issues in household survey. What actually the household survey is? The household survey is a research method used by social scientists to empirically and scientifically study and provide information about people and social phenomena. Survey is scientific because it's an established process that can be followed, documented, and replicated. But why survey research is so popular? There are three main elements that make survey research popular. One is generalization. You can generalize your findings to the main population. It is efficient because you can do this, collect data in less time and with less cost. And the versatility, because you can collect data on many aspects. For example, you can use survey for livelihood studies, for academic achievements and many other aspects. So that's why the survey research is so popular. The question comes, when should we do survey research? While planning for survey research, we should keep in mind that survey research is appropriate when there is not scanty data available. Number two, there is a desire to generalize your findings to the larger population. And the number three, target respondent population is accessible. Let's talk about two different types of survey. One, the interview, and the second one is the questionnaire. We will mainly focus on questionnaire today. The questionnaire survey is an actually structured research instrument with written question aimed at gathering standardized information from many respondents using well-defined variables. It's good to collect information on knowledge, perception, descriptive features, and the risk factor, while it has its limitation for attitude and practices. The question comes, what is actually the household survey is? Any survey that is administered at the household level and having a unit of analysis of household is called household survey, and it is useful to collect information about the household and the individuals living in those households. However, the tricky question is what could be meant by the household? The definition of a household could vary in different contexts, and therefore it is very important while developing your questionnaire you should first define what is household. Generally, we could say that a household consists of one or more people who live in the same dwelling and also share meals or living accommodation and may consist of a single family or other group of people. You should keep in mind that the way you define household could have an implication on the collection of your data. So while defining, you should keep that what are the objectives of the research and the culture area of the study. So about the questionnaire design, Lawrence will talk about.
Yeah, as we have already pointed out, questionnaire is an important part of household survey. In development of an effective questionnaire also pose some challenges, but every challenge has solution. And say for every to be able to develop an effective questionnaire, it should meet the research objectives. It should be clear. It should be brief and concise, and also it should be able to collect the required data within a short or reasonable time. What then are the steps for one to follow in designing an effective questionnaire? The first one is to decide on your required information, and this can be obtained from the research objectives. You also have to define your target respondents and select the methods for reaching your respondent. The methods could be telephone, direct interview, and also decide on the research, the question content or the content of the questions. The next step is to develop the questions wording, how you word your questions, and you must also put the questions in a clear format or layout. And there's also the need to check the length of the questionnaire. It shouldn't be too long. And after doing all these things, you need to pre-test your questionnaire to check for clarity, comprehensiveness, or acceptability. After pre-testing, if you see there is a need to follow or there is something wrong, then you have to follow the steps again. You go to decide and follow it upward before you can develop your final questionnaire.
Thank you, Lawrence, for giving such a nice overview of the questionnaire design. I will talk about the sampling process, how many sample you should collect, and who should you use as your respondent. Their main basic steps in the sampling is: first, you should define the study population, you should define the sampling frame, and the sampling design. By sampling design, we mean what techniques you will use, like simple random sampling or the systematic design, and how many numbers you should select. And the last one, you should define the unit of analysis, which is in our case is household. However, we can see that the other aspects of the sampling has been covered in other lectures, so we will mainly talk about how many respondents you should select. There are two ways you can calculate the sample numbers. The first is the rule of thumb. In that one, you can say that if a population is completely homogeneous, only one respondent should be sufficient to represent your data. But can you imagine, is it possible to have a homogeneous population? Our answer to this question is no, because we live in a heterogeneous population and heterogeneous world. So if population is heterogeneous and the number of the people is less than 1000, you can say that the 30% respondent may be sufficient. If it is up to 10,000, then 10% respondent, and if more than 150,000, then only 1% respondent may be sufficient to represent your data. But the question is, if the sample size is greater than 100, it may be possible that it is beyond the budget and the time of the master thesis student. So we should look for other methods to calculate the sample size. The other method could be the formula method, where you calculate the sample number based on the described formulas. The formula 1 and the 2 can be used to calculate the sample number from the finite population, and these are denoted by these numbers, like n represent number of sample for infinite population and so on. There are certain steps that you can follow in estimating the sample size. The first one is you should be able to calculate or estimate the standard deviation. There are two ways you can estimate the standard deviation. The first one is use previous studies in the same area on the same variable. What does it mean? It means that if you are going to conduct a study in rural area of Nepal on household income and there is already a study being conducted there, so you can use the standard deviation from that study and for your study as well. The second one is, for example, if there is no previous study has been conducted, so then you can conduct a pilot study on few households and calculate your standard deviation for the same variable. The second step is calculate the confidence of interval, and that you can use to calculate by using the alpha value either as 0.05 or 0.01. By alpha value mean the required accuracy or required confidence level you want to have. To calculate this confidence interval, you may go to Excel, type confidence and place the value of alpha either 0.05 or 0.01 or any other value, and the standard deviation you have calculated from the pilot study or you are using from the previous study, and type the total number of population, and that's the way you will get confidence interval. The third step is to substitute these values in equation 1 to get n and substitute the values of n in equation for correction factor. Yes. Who should we sample is another question. There could be the three possible ways you can say that the who should be your respondent. The first case is the household head. But the problem with this that what do we mean by household and what if household is headed by many heads? So in this case, we suggest that you should clearly define what do you mean by head of household, and if the case is that head is headed by many household, you should be clearly identified whom you will go to the interview or the questionnaire asking. The second is whomever is available. The problem with this method that maybe you at the end will come out about the number of respondents of the females and the children much more larger than the male respondent. So we would suggest that you should not go for this strategy. The third strategy, which we think is much more effective, is the multiple members of household. But the problem with this method is that you may not find time and budget to do this, or the other problem is one member can influence the other. However, use any of this strategy for conducting of your household survey, but please be sure that you have considered these things before doing the household survey. The next thing is what challenges you could face in the field, and this will talk by Saifu.
Thank you. So the thing is, you are now in the field, and I will talk about some few challenges you may face and you need to be conscious. The first thing is to get accommodation, and the second thing is being accepted by the community in which you are working. And the second challenge is about the entry point and the permission, the guide, and the just test about you are being accepted by the community. So the third challenge you may face and you need to be aware is the non-respondent problem. So you need to be actually aware about the problem of non-respondents. The solution could be like having more sample size, like 5 to 10% more the required one as a contingency, and you need to approach the people to actually respond to your questions rather than leave them. And the second challenge in the field is about sensitive issues, like maybe some people are really they don't like to be asked some sensitive issues, like the wife may be just afraid of talking about some private things in front of the family. And some income issues are also very sensitive. Some illegal activities like illegal logging and poaching, like sexual behavior is so very sensitive. So you have to be aware of those thing is, the solution is actually, before going to the solution, what's then the risk of asking these sensitive issues? You may get some untruthful or answers, or the participant may just drop the participation. And once then the solution you may consider is you need to convince the respondent that data is really confidential and for academic purpose only, and give some sensitive issues towards the end of the questionnaire so that you will not lose the respondent as interview. And the next thing is the fatigue issue. So fatigue is about bored or tired respondents. So if you always go to the same people, they may get tired by having the same questions. So they may give you answers like, I don't know. They may just go straight to some immediate and automatic answers instead of giving the actual answers. So you need to be very aware of these problems. So the next thing is about ethics, and will be presented by Lawrence.
Yeah, for ethical issues, it's important for every researcher to also observe some ethical issues before, during, and after every research. And here for ethics, there is the need to protect the right of respondents to their free will, to privacy, to confidentiality and well-being, and every researcher should also minimize the burden of the study participation to the greatest extent possible. And a researcher should also observe ethics by being tactful on sensitive information. A researcher should not use force or coercion to obtain information. We should also respect the right of respondent at all times. And we should also make sure we do not exclude minority groups, as settlers or from indigenous people when we are sampling. And we should also observe professional standards. We should ask ourselves, is it appropriate to use household survey for this research? And if there is a need to disclose any conflict of interest information, you should disclose it. Enumerators should also be trained. Enumerators of data collectors should be trained to also observe ethical issues. So in summary, we like to say that household survey affords researchers the opportunity to make generalized statements about an entire population by investigating the household as a unit of analysis. And the definition of household varies from place to place and should be clearly defined before the onset of a research. And household survey have some challenges, and these relate to selection of sample, acceptability and preparedness of the respondent to answer to questions, and also ethical issues relating to respondent and also professional behavior on the part of the researcher. Please follow this link to take this exercise for you to know if you really understand the presentation. We would like to thank you very much, and we hope that you've enjoyed our learning resource. Thank you for your attention.